All right guys, so today I'm gonna show you what it takes to put some bigger, meatier tires on a Coleman go-kart. This is the GK200 model. I think that this process is gonna be specific to this model. I don't think the specs and all the details that I'm gonna get into applies to the KT196. But obviously this is their new model. I know a lot of people are just getting their hands on these. So it was not easy to try to identify or figure out a way to put some bigger tires on this thing. You could increase the tire size using the factory hubs and wheels, but not by much, only maybe a little bit wider and a little bit taller. But finding something to fit on a 7-inch wheel, which is what these come with factory, is very limited. You're not gonna find a lot of bigger wheels. So I have figured out a whole setup. It's a custom setup, obviously. I had to piece it together. But I am going to put some 18-inch tires on here. The factory tires are 16, so the spec is 16 by 8-7. So that's 16 diameter, 8 wide on a 7 rim. So I'm going to an 18 diameter, 9.5 wide on an 8 rim. And this is what they look like. So I'm switching to a 4-bolt pattern, which you could probably see. I'm gonna throw in a close-up of the wheels so you can see the setup as well. But it's going to a 4-bolt pattern, 4x110. And I also had to use an 1.5 inch spacer. So, and I had to switch the hub, obviously, to the 4-bolt. And you need to make sure it's a 23 spleen hub. So that's what the axle is on the GK200. It is a 23 spleen. So let's see how this goes. I'm gonna get it jacked up. I'm gonna swap them out. And I did adjust the torque converter spring to hole number 2. It was on hole number 1 when I received it. So now that I'm going to a little bit bigger of a tire, I'm looking for a little more low-end torque. So I went to hole number 2. I always have hole 3 if I need to, but again, this is for my 8-year-old son. You know, I really don't want it to be crazy powerful. So just looking for a little bit more clearance, a little more beef on the back tire. I'm only jumping up 2 inches, even though the tire looks a lot bigger. It's only a 2-inch diameter increase, and you're looking at about an 1.5 inch wider according to the spec, but I gotta tell you, it looks a lot wider than that. I think that the actual tread width on this is probably closer to like 10.5. So you can see the difference there, but we're gonna get him thrown on and see how it goes. All right, so here we have both wheels mounted up to the hubs with the spacers installed, ready to go. And there's your back pattern. So let's get these mounted. All right guys, so we got her jacked up. Got the frame sitting on some jack stands here. I already have the bolts loose on the hubs. So let's pop these small tires off and get the big boys on there and see how it looks, and we'll see how it runs. All right, so here it is. We have the bigger rear tires mounted up. We have plenty of clearance between the shock here. And actually, when I got these mounted, I tried them without the spacers, and it would clear the frame, but it was just catching this shock tower. So I almost got away without using a spacer, and you could get away with doing a 1-inch spacer, but I wanted them to be as wide as possible just for stability, so I went with the 1.5. So this is fitted with the 1.5. Everything is nice and tight. You know, your cotter pins all still work from the factory. So it is, you know, pretty much good to go, but you do need the spacer to clear that rear strut, rear shock, and then you'll be good to go. So You know, now when you look at it, these back tires are about even with the front tires, if not sticking out maybe slightly further than the front tires. But the factory wheels, when you look at it, they're actually more narrow in the back than they are in the front. You know, in any off-road machine I've ever had, four-wheeler, go-kart in my life, in my past, I've always thrown, you know, spaces on it or a wider axle to get that rear end a little bit wider. And, you know, it just gives you so much more stability, you know, for power sliding and doing donuts and things like that. So I wanted to do that on my son's kart here just to maybe help him from flipping it a little bit, you know, give him a little more width on the rear end. These are whole shot replicas. I got them from VMC, Chinese parts, along with the wheels. I'm gonna throw up some screenshots of the actual parts, you know, that I used to put this kit together. So I bought the tires, I bought the wheels, which were 8-inch wheels, upgrading from the 7-inch factories. I bought the hubs, and I bought the spacers. So, and then I just had a local, you know, lawnmower repair shop mount up these tires on the wheels for me. And everything came together as I expected. So we're just gonna fire it up and see how she goes. Now the other update I wanted to leave since my last video is we had done the intake and the exhaust on the last video. I was getting a little bit of, you know, misfiring and putting, especially under heavy acceleration. At first, when I installed the intake and the exhaust, I didn't really notice it. But after a few hours of my son riding it, I noticed it more and more, and I could hear it when he was driving. You know, I'm like, yeah, that thing's missing. So I purchased a full jet kit from ProQuip on eBay. And I will include a link in the description to all the parts as well. So if anybody, you know, is looking to do what I'm doing here, then it'll be nice and easy. Just click and pay. But I bought the jet kit. It's the full jet kit, so it came with 3 different main jets. I don't remember, I think it's 35 to 37 or 36 to 38. One of those, I can't remember exactly. But again, there'll be a link to the actual kit I bought. It also came with the upgraded secondary jet and the emulsion tube. So it's basically like a match set for all of their stage 1 builds that they do. And so I used the smallest one that came in the set just to try it out, and it's been perfect. Also, I wanted to mention that the carburetor that comes on these is not modifiable. I guess technically it could be. I read something about, you know, that you can like drill out the main jet of those carbs and put a bigger jet in it, but these carburetors are so cheap anyway. I ended up just buying a whole new carburetor, one that has, you know, a changeable jet, main jet, and also one that has the air fuel ratio, because the factory carb that comes on these also has no air fuel ratio adjustment. It comes plugged. That hole where the adjustment screw usually is just plugged. So you really don't have much adjusting or modifications available with the factory carb. So I would highly recommend just buying a new carb. I think I paid like $12 for the one that I got. And you know, now it's fully adjustable, fully modifiable. And this thing runs like perfect now, and it's strong. You know, it don't misfire, sounds good. My son noticed a huge difference when I put the jet kit in it. You know, he took one ride around the house in the field, and he came back, he was like, wow, Dad, this thing's got power now. And mind you, I still have this thing limited to about 50%. This is not going wide open by any means. So I have no intentions of like removing the governor or anything like that, because it would just be way too much power for, you know, a little kid. So this thing's rated for 10-year-old and up. My son's 8, don't tell anyone. But he's grown up on dirt bikes. You know, he's been riding a dirt bike since he was 4 years old. So he's 8 now. He handles it no problem. He drives his little sister around on it. And so far, everything has been good. The final thing that I did upgrade was the chain, because believe it or not, the factory chain, one day while he was riding, the master link just popped right off. So he came to a stop, couldn't figure out what was going on. So he called me over, and the chain was laying on the ground. Master link had disappeared. So I threw on a racing chain. It's a gold link racing chain, 420. And I bought a chain big enough where I could actually get 2 chains out of it. So this chain, I believe it was, don't quote me on it, but I want to say it was like 50 centimeters long or inches long. I forget how they measure the chain, so don't quote me on that. I'll put a link to the chain as well. Sorry for my ignorance on that, but I bought a long enough chain where I could break it, and I actually had 2 sections now long enough to do a chain on this. So if anything happens to this chain, I have a whole nother length sitting on my workbench ready to go if I need it. And I also bought an extra master link for that chain as well. So I have a whole chain and a master link ready to go in case that happens. A note on that is this adjustment right here, these 2 bolts. So your whole engine and transmission assembly is on a pivot. It's on a hinge over here up behind the seat. So when you put a chain on, or if you have to adjust the chain or change the chain, you can unloosen these bolts, and this actually raises and lowers the entire engine assembly to put tension on that chain or to loosen the chain or whatever you're trying to do. So that was very easy. When I put the new chain on, had a little bit of slack on it versus the factory chain. So I had to jack this up maybe about 1/4 of an inch to get that slack out, but now it's perfect and it's been running great, hasn't fallen off or anything like that. So yeah, so that's where I'm at. Again, all the links will be down in the description for every part that I bought for this thing. Definitely looks badass with the big tires on it. And you know, you'll get to see some video of my son ripping it around as well right after this. All right, so thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll try to help everybody out. I'm not a guru at this, but you know, I'm pretty handy and I figure stuff out as I go. So I can share any of my experiences, or again, if you have any difficulties doing the upgrade yourself, shoot me a comment and I'll respond as soon as I can. All right, thanks guys. All right guys, so here's the spacer hub setup that I put together. So the hub, this came from VMC Chinese parts. It's a 23 spleen, 4 by 110. And then the spacers are 1.5 inch spacers, 4 by 110. So in order to make this work, you have to create studs instead of using, you know, straight in this way. When you mount it, you got to switch it around and do studs, because you need to be able to use these self-centering lug nuts. So spacer, hub, bolts, and your lug nuts here, 10 by 1.5. These here are just stainless bolts I got from Home Depot, and these are 10 by 1.5 by 40 millimeter in length. So, you know, basically you're creating wheel studs on the hub and then securing them with the lug nut. The reason it needs to be self-centering is because the hole on the spacers is a little wide for the screws. So, you know, you get a little bit of wiggle room. The lug nuts will center those up when you tighten them down. So just pop it on right there, just like that. And then pop on your lug nuts. And it just so happened, because I was worried about this, but it just so happened that these lug nuts, when they're all the way seated, sit perfectly flush with the top of this. So it doesn't affect the wheel mounting at all. And as you can see, I have one right here, already all mounted up. So the lug nuts sit right under there, allow the wheel to mount up flush. So that is the hub and spacer assembly broken down as far as how I put it together. All right guys, so there she is, looking a little beefy. That's looking pretty good.